The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back rows, their fingers hovering over keyboards, anticipating another routine hearing. On the bench sat Judge Edward Chen, stoic, sharp-tongued, and, as some would say, smug. Before him stood Pam Bondi, poised in her crisp navy suit, representing a whistleblower in a high-profile corruption case that had begun to rattle some of DC's deepest foundations. Chen adjusted his glasses and leaned slightly forward. "Ms. Bondi," he said, dragging her name with theatrical disdain, "this isn't a political rally. It's a courtroom. Try to keep the dramatics to a minimum." Pam didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed locked on his. "I'm not here for drama, Your Honor. I'm here for justice." A few people in the courtroom murmured, but Chen raised a hand. "Justice?" He chuckled dryly. "I've seen better theatrics on daytime TV." The gallery laughed. But Bondi didn't. She calmly slid a thick folder across the table to the clerk. "Then I hope you enjoy what's coming next." Judge Chen rolled his eyes and gavelled for silence, clearly amused with himself. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, one he didn't see coming. As the clerk handed the folder to Judge Chen, a hush fell over the courtroom. The judge flipped it open, still wearing that smirk, until his eyes caught the first few lines of the affidavit. Pam Bondi stepped forward. "What you're holding, Your Honor, is a sworn statement, along with internal memos and transaction records, directly tying your office to undisclosed communications with defense lobbyists. Including 3 off-the-record meetings last month, 2 of which were funded by parties with direct interests in this case." Chen's face drained of color. What is this nonsense?" he snapped, slamming the folder shut. "These allegations are fabricated. This is an attempt to undermine the judiciary." But Bondi remained firm. "That's not just paper, Judge. That's evidence. Backed by phone records, financial trails, and witness testimony." The courtroom erupted into murmurs. One reporter bolted for the exit, phone already to his ear. Judge Chen rose from the bench, visibly rattled. "I'll strike this from the record." "You can't," Bondi said coolly. "Because as of 5 minutes ago, this information was handed to the Department of Justice." The bailiff looked uncertain. The court stenographer had paused typing. The air in the courtroom had shifted, from smugness to something far more electric. And then, the side door opened. 2 U.S. Marshals walked in. The heavy door clicked shut behind the marshals as they stepped forward, the badges on their belts gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The courtroom froze. Every breath held. Every eye on the judge. "Judge Edward Chen," one of the marshals asked, voice low but firm. Chen blinked. "This is a mistake," he said quickly, his tone stripped of its usual arrogance. "I have full judicial immunity. I demand to speak to." "You can do that after processing," the second marshal interrupted, stepping to the side of the bench. Pam Bondi remained silent, arms crossed, gaze locked on Chen. Her stillness spoke louder than any outburst ever could. The judge stepped back as if the bench might shield him, but it didn't. The lead marshal produced a folded warrant. "You are under investigation for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to suppress evidence, and ethics violations related to this court proceeding. We have federal authority." Gasps broke out across the gallery. "This is outrageous." Chen shouted, but his voice cracked under pressure. "This is political theater." Pam finally spoke. "No, Your Honor. This is accountability." As the marshals closed in, Chen looked around the courtroom, searching for someone, anyone, who might defend him. But no one moved. Judge Chen's robe rippled as he stepped down from the bench, hands trembling, face pale. One of the marshals gently but firmly took his wrist to begin cuffing him. "You can't do this in my courtroom," Chen muttered, panic creeping into his voice. "This is my courtroom." "No," Pam Bondi said, steady and clear. "It belongs to the people. And they're done being silenced." The chains clicked. Flashbulbs went off like fireworks from the press row. Reporters scrambled to capture every second, phones raised, mics thrust forward, streams going live. The image was stunning: a federal judge, still in robes, hands cuffed behind his back, escorted down the very aisle he once ruled over. One woman in the gallery whispered, "I never thought I'd see the day." As Chen was led past her, his eyes darted to Pam. "You'll regret this," he hissed under his breath. But she didn't even blink. "You already do." The courtroom doors swung open as the judge was taken out under full escort. Outside, sirens echoed faintly as a convoy waited. Inside, silence reigned. And then, applause. Quiet at first, then building into something steady. Not a cheer, but something deeper. Vindication. The moment the doors closed behind the marshals and the disgraced judge, Pam Bondi exhaled. It wasn't over, far from it. But the hardest part was done. The rest was just paperwork and press conferences. She gathered her files calmly, methodically, as the courtroom buzzed with disbelief. Reporters were already sprinting toward their vans. Legal analysts whispered urgently into phones. But Pam didn't flinch. She moved like someone who had known this outcome before it unfolded. Across the room, the court clerk approached cautiously. "Ms. Bondi," she said, "do you really think they'll prosecute a sitting federal judge?" Pam met her eyes. "They already started. I just handed them the last piece." The clerk nodded, stunned. "How long have you known?" 3 months, Pam said. "We followed the wire transfers. The meetings. Even the burner phones. He thought he was untouchable. And now?" Pam looked toward the empty bench. "Now he's just another name in a case file." The courtroom was slowly clearing out, but a few citizens lingered in the back, watching her. One elderly man walked up to her with a trembling hand extended. "You gave us back faith in the system," he said softly. Pam shook his hand and gave a rare smile. "No, sir. I just reminded it who it's supposed to work for." Back at her temporary office just a block from the courthouse, Pam Bondi sat surrounded by stacks of sealed folders, encrypted drives, and 2 laptops running real-time updates. Her team was small, just 3 trusted aides, but they were razor-sharp. "DOJ confirmed receipt," said Marcus, her lead investigator. "They're moving fast. Internal Affairs is requesting to see the surveillance footage from Chen's chambers." Pam nodded. "They'll find what we did: late-night entries, falsified logs, and a private server routed through a shell company in Nevada." A younger aide, Lila, looked up. "But how deep does this go? I mean, if Chen was this sloppy, who else was covering for him?" Pam tapped the top of a manila envelope with a post-it labeled, "Confidential, Network Level 2. "It's not just him," she said. "We found matching patterns in 3 other courts, one in D.C., one in Florida, and one in Arizona. All the same law firms. All the same payout structure. Same crypto wallets." Lila blinked. "So this is part of something organized?" Pam looked up, her voice low. "No. It's something designed." There was a pause in the room as the gravity settled. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Judge Chen wasn't the kingpin. He was a pawn. Pam opened her laptop and pulled up a list of sealed indictments. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad. "We don't stop now. We escalate." The next morning, headlines exploded across every major outlet: "Federal judge arrested in courtroom shocker, Pam Bondi exposes corruption web stretching into federal benches, DOJ confirms investigation into multi-state judicial collusion," but Bondi wasn't basking in it. She was already 2 steps ahead. Sitting in a secure briefing room in D.C., she slid a photo across the table to a federal prosecutor. It showed a familiar face: Judge Leonard Mallory, retired, revered, and often seen on cable news as a neutral expert on constitutional law. Mallory, the prosecutor asked, stunned. He's been on every legal panel for decades. Pam leaned in. And behind every single case connected to this network. We traced Chen's communications back to him, encrypted messages, conference retreats, and donations through his legal foundation. He's not retired. He's operational. The prosecutor stared at the photo, then whispered, "This goes to the top." Pam nodded slowly. It was never just about one judge mocking a lawyer in court. That was the mistake. They thought if they humiliated me publicly, I'd back off. But you didn't. Pam looked him in the eye. I came for the whole machine. The prosecutor leaned back, the weight of the revelation crashing down. If you're right, the judicial system's about to crack open. Pam stood, gathering the file. No. It's about to get cleaned. That evening, in an undisclosed federal building outside Alexandria, Virginia, Pam Bondi and a pair of DOJ agents stepped into a secured records vault, temperature-controlled, double-locked, and monitored 24/7. It was where sensitive intelligence was reviewed away from prying eyes and political pressure. Inside, a steel cabinet marked Level Omega, Judicial, was already open, with a stack of evidence folders arranged neatly on the table. Most were labeled with court district numbers. But one stood out. Pam picked it up. On the tab, Operation Gray Bench. "This is it," said Agent Resner, glancing nervously at the door. "The file we weren't supposed to find." Inside were photos, call transcripts, offshore wire trails, painstakingly collected over nearly a decade. But the last page was what made Pam go still. It was a typed memo. Gray Bench Phase 3, shield targets by feeding disinformation through high-credibility media surrogates. Ensure judicial immunity remains intact by using procedural obfuscation. Target any public disruptors for disbarment or defamation. Below that, signatures. Recognizable ones. And at the bottom, Judge Leonard Mallory. Pam slowly closed the file. They weren't just covering corruption, she whispered. They were designing an architecture to protect it. Agent Resner looked pale. "What do you want us to do?" Pam didn't blink. "I want a war room. Tonight." By midnight, the war room was humming. Located in a secured wing of a DOJ annex, it was fitted with soundproof walls, secure terminals, and a live connection to 5 field offices. Maps of federal court jurisdictions covered one side of the wall, while live intel streams blinked on the other. Pam Bondi stood at the center, her sleeves rolled up, voice calm but cutting through the chatter like a blade. "Operation Gray Bench isn't just about corrupt judges," she said. "It's a layered network, funded through legal PACs, white shoe firms, and cloaked nonprofits. They've infected rulings, stifled investigations, and laundered decisions." Her team listened, silent. "Judge Chen was their test subject," she continued. "A mid-tier player with just enough arrogance to bait us. But the real players, Mallory and his circle, used him as a firewall. A digital board lit up with names, photos, and connections. 5 judges. 3 defense firms. 2 shadowy donors. 1 Supreme Court advisor. "Here's the good news," she said, turning toward the task force. "They got comfortable. They thought no one would dig this deep. And they never expected someone like me to make it personal." Lila, her aide, leaned over. "What's the first strike?" Pam pointed to the screen. "We go after Mallory's foundation. Follow the money. Freeze it. Once his funding dries up, his power collapses. And after that," asked one of the agents. Pam's eyes sharpened. "Then we take down every judge who sold the robe." By sunrise, the financial freeze was already in motion. Mallory's foundation, once praised as a pillar of legal reform, was blindsided. Millions in assets were frozen. Accounts in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, and even Delaware were locked. Anonymous tip lines lit up like wildfire as insiders began flipping. At 8:42 a.m., Pam received the confirmation she'd been waiting for. "Bondi," said the agent on the line, "we got him. Mallory's boarding gate was just shut down at Reagan. Marshals have him. Calm. No resistance. But get this, he asked for you." Pam hung up without a word and walked straight into the press briefing room. Flanked by federal officials and DOJ staff, she stood behind the podium, stone-faced. "This morning," she began, "former federal judge Leonard Mallory was taken into custody. His arrest marks the second in a growing investigation into a covert judicial corruption ring, one designed to manipulate court outcomes, stifle dissent, and quietly rewrite the law from the bench." Gasps and camera shutters filled the room. "This isn't just a legal failure," she said. "It's a betrayal of the public trust. But today, we begin repairing that trust." A reporter stood. "Are there more arrests coming?" Pam locked eyes with him. "We're not done." Another called out, "How far up does this go?" She paused, then said plainly, "As far as it needs to." Back in the war room, the real battle was just beginning. On the center table lay a printed document no one dared to touch without gloves. 12 names. All judges. All currently seated in high-level federal courts. Some were media darlings. Others were seen as incorruptible titans of the bench. At the top of the list, Judge Rain Whitlock, Ninth Circuit, known for grandstanding rulings and elite legal circles. Pam stood over the document, arms crossed, eyes cold. They were all in communication with Mallory's foundation. Same encrypted apps. Same off-the-record retreats. Same payouts hidden as consulting grants. Marcus, her investigator, tapped his pen nervously. "If we go public with this, the legal system takes a credibility hit nationwide." Pam nodded. "That's what they're counting on. Fear. Hesitation. But silence is what gave them power." Lila interjected, "One wrong move, and they'll call this a political witch hunt." Pam's voice hardened. "Then we don't make a wrong move." She turned to the board and wrote 3 words in red marker, "Judges are not gods." The room quieted. "Tomorrow," she said, "we subpoena Whitlock." Quietly. Then the next. And the next. No press, no leaks. We gather everything, we lock it down, and we bring them to heel in their own chambers. She looked up at the team. They mocked justice. Time to remind them what it looks like. 3 weeks later, the legal world looked nothing like it did before. 12 federal judges suspended. 4 indicted. 2 in federal custody without bail. Whistleblowers emerged from clerks' offices and old law firm ties. Entire case histories were reopened. Mistrials declared. And for the first time in decades, faith in the system wasn't just a slogan, it was a fight. Judge Rain Whitlock had been the final linchpin. When confronted with the digital trail, a trove of messages, crypto transfers, and secret meetings, he didn't argue. He folded. And with him came the keys to the rest of the network. At a nationally televised press conference, Pam Bondi stepped to the podium one final time. "Justice isn't an illusion," she began. "But it's fragile. It can be manipulated, mocked, and, for a time, even bought. But not forever." She paused. "They laughed at me in open court. They thought exposing them was impossible. That power could hide behind robes and legal jargon. That I wouldn't dare. The crowd was silent. I dared. And now, they're the ones behind locked doors." A beat passed, then thunderous applause erupted. Later that night, alone in her office, Pam stared at the original folder that started it all, Judge Chen's file. She whispered to herself, "One smirk too many." Then she slid the file into the archive. Case closed. Justice served. System rebooted.